Well, today it's Christmas. We're in the Christmas season. It's not Christmas, but we are in the Christmas season, which I love. I love saying Merry Christmas to people, and they look at me weird, and I just love doing it to everybody, strangers and family alike. And I want to share with you today an awkward Christmas story that I had. That took place in my life a few years ago, and it actually took place with my future in-laws. At this time, I was dating my wife, now Courtney, and I was living in Seattle. I was a children's pastor at a church known as Redwood Hills in Kirkland, Washington. And she was living in Ellensburg. She was a dental hygienist, and we were planning on meeting in Pasco, where we're both from and where her family is, to spend Christmas with her family. And I was really excited about this opportunity because I'm trying to kiss up to them so they'll let me marry their daughter. And so my plan is to be on a really good behavior, so don't be myself. Talk really like professional, which I don't know how to do. And just come off like a great guy, okay? So they would be like, oh, that's a good guy to marry, Courtney. And so there was a little hiccup, though, in our plans to get to Pasco. I had recently been in a car accident, and I got a check from my insurance to purchase a new car. And I had a few weeks to do this, and I had a rental car. But I couldn't find a car I liked, and work was getting busy as we're getting ready to go to break, and I just didn't have time to really find the car I wanted, so I was becoming desperate. I started going on Craigslist, just trying to find some vehicle that I could buy that could get me to Pasco. And so turns out my rental car ran up. I had to find a car on literally Christmas Eve, the afternoon of, hours before I had to leave to get back to Pasco. I met a guy in like a carpooling parking lot in Bellevue. He brought his car. It looked really nice. Everything was great on Craigslist. Everything checked out. The pictures were great. It was like a Volkswagen Passat. And I was really excited. I brought the cash, and at this point, I was like, I'm buying this car no matter what, because I don't have a car, and B, I got to get to Pasco. And so I meet this guy in the parking lot. I get out of my car. Car's parked right there in front of me, and it is in awesome condition. Looks fantastic. I look inside the car. Looks great. Look at the mileage. Everything that he said it was. And then before we're finalizing things, I take one little look around the car. I get to the back of the car, and on the back of the car is this gigantic decal of like this devil woman in a very inappropriate pajamas. And let's just say it was very well endowed in many areas of herself, okay? And I was just like, holy smokes, man, is that thing going to come off? He goes, oh, yeah, you just got to go to the store and buy this decal remover. It'll be fine. I'm like, well, too late now. Here's the cash. I got in the car. I literally drove from that parking lot to Pasco. And on the way from Bellevue to Pasco, I was thinking in my head, like, I can't show up to my girlfriend's parents' house with a devil woman on the back of my car. They're going to think they knew me, but they didn't, know me yet. And this is not the impression I wanted to show on Christmas. And so I stop at, on the way, I stop at, a Napa store or some car store, and I buy this, decal remover, and I spray it on. I'm trying to get it off. This thing's not coming off. So then I go back in the store, and I buy the next expensive one. Still nothing. I go back in and buy, the most expensive one. I think I spent almost over $100 by the end of this. That thing would not come off. And so I get in my car because I got to get there. And so I'm just driving, what am I going to do? And then I think, oh, it's going to be dark. So I'll just pull the card of, let's just look at it in the morning when it's light out, because you'll get a better view of it than at night. And so I thought I had more time to figure out how am I going to get this hideous thing off my car before I get kicked out or punched. And so I show up to my girlfriend's parents' house, and I go inside thinking that I had this all mapped out in my head. And the first thing they do after shaking my hand and welcoming me is, hey, we want to see your new car. And, her whole family's there. And so I'm like, oh, geez. I'm like, please, let's just wait till the morning. It's dark out. I want you to see the best car in its best peak position. And that's daytime when the sun's out, shining bright, and there's no devil woman on it. And so they're like, no, we want to see it now. So I'm not going to fight with them because again, I'm trying to impress them. So I'm like, oh yeah, let's go see it. So we go outside, and I remember standing there just waiting for something bad to happen. And they're looking at the car, and they're like, this is awesome. Perfect car, great car, blah, blah, blah. And then my mother-in-law makes her way to the back of the car. Now, she's the nicest woman in the world. She's perfect. And she's like a Hallmark card, but she's a person, okay? And she sees it, and she just goes, oh my gosh, Troy. And I'm just like, yeah, I didn't even know what to say. It was a very awkward time for me, really getting to know my in-laws, and luckily they just started talking to me again, so that's great. But how do we deal with some of the awkwardness behind the Christmas season? If you're a parent here of kids now, or maybe your kids are grown, you know what it was like, or what it is like to go to the mall and get your picture with Santa. Long lines, kids running around with no supervision, kids throwing up, kids crying, and parents overreacting because they didn't get the right angle from their phone camera. It's a great thing to do. Have fun. The second thing is, how about you have to go to your spouse's work Christmas party, okay? Your spouse's work Christmas party, probably the last place we want to be. We don't know anybody. It's not going to be fun for us. It's going to be awkward. I'd rather be home watching a 30 for 30 on ESPN or something like that. Or having to go to your own Christmas party. Let's be honest. If we were all honest here, there's probably somebody at work we don't get along with or we just don't like. And so if we go to that Christmas party, that means we have to be around them, which is not fun, or we don't want to do it. And the last one is, your mom and your dad are awesome people, and they love to invite strangers to Christmas dinner. And what does that mean for you? It means you don't get to watch what you want. It means you don't get to wear what you want, because now your mom wants you to impress and host this person you don't even know. And then you can't eat early because they don't want to upset the guest, or that makes them feel weird. So it just creates this weird vibe in the house, and your privacy is out the window. Well, today we want to continue in the 4-part Christmas series that we have started here called A Royal Scandal. Justin kicked it off last week, and it's all about Jesus' genealogy in Matthew chapter 1. Embracing Emmanuel, God with us, meaning we focus on Christ's divinity and also, this series, heavily on his humanity. Focusing on, not so much on what he would become, but about where he came from. What did his ancestry look like? Discovering that our legacy is not defined by lineage, nor our holiness by heritage. And last week, Justin really summed up a great week, and I might butcher this name, so forgive me. Tamar, I think I said it wrong the first service. That's the great thing about second service, unless you say it wrong twice, which we'll find out. But this was the synopsis of what he talked about last week, and it's a fantastic, fantastic, encouraging statement. It's this: God's plans are far bigger than our own mistakes. Now that encourages me because I've made a lot of mistakes. And to think that God's plans are bigger than that gives me hope, and I hope it does you too, especially during the Christmas season. And today we want to continue our research of the genealogy of Jesus' lineage by going to the second female listed in that, and her name was Rahab. And you can find her story in the book of Joshua, chapter 2 and 6. Also, she's mentioned later on in Hebrews, which we'll get to here in a second. But it's important, before we get into Rahab and what she meant to the Christmas story and what we're going to talk about today, that we really jump into this story. And the cool thing is, about a month ago or so, when we were in the Circle Maker series, Justin actually covered this story of Jericho and Joshua leading the Israelites through the desert, trying to get to the promised land, and then they came across this gigantic empire called Jericho that was surrounded by 4 walls that no one had ever been able to infiltrate or defeat. Very intimidating, very evil, so much so that God wanted it destroyed. And here are the Israelites and Joshua coming upon it. And culturally, and even sometimes we read in the Bible, we see a lot of war, right? But in this moment, when they were going to do what they'd done previously, which was attack, God told them, pray. So instead of fight, he told them to pray. And so his idea was, I'm going to send 2 spies in. Now, it's important that we even go before that. How they got there was that they were enslaved for over 200 years, the Israelites, with the Egyptians, the Pharaoh, holding them hostage, making them do crazy things, building, working, nonstop, just being slaves. 200 years of this before Joshua, Moses led the people and got them out. And we all know the story of Moses with the plagues, and there's even a movie out about it now. And here are all these crazy plagues where God showed Egyptians and the Israelites that he was the only and was the one true God. And so they wandered in the desert for years and years, and it was all because they continued to doubt and disobey, even though God did so much for them, provided for them, protected them, just showed so much favor. Until that first generation died off, that's what led us to Joshua and the Israelites and getting to where we are now in today's story, which is at the point of Jericho, so close to the promised land. And so as we said before, they were told not to fight, but to pray. And while they were praying, Joshua had an idea from God to send 2 spies in, sneak into that town, and I want you to come back with a report. Tell me, what their town looks like. What's the layout? Is their army really as strong as they say it is? Are these people, these fearful, just incredible warriors that we've heard? And so these 2 spies do exactly what they're supposed to do. And before we get there, I want to share with you the verse of the day. And this verse of the day is found in the book of Hebrews, and this is what it says. It was by faith that Rahab, the prostitute, was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. That's out of Hebrews 11:31. That was read out of the NLT. And so here we are. The spies are now inside. They found a way in. And they come to a point now where they're desperate for some shelter. The town of Jericho had caught wind that they were in. They found out that the spies had gotten past the city gates, the city wall, and they'd made their way in, and they knew they were there. And so now the town council, whatever you want to call them, their government says, hey, we got to release our soldiers. So they released their army to go through the town to find these 2 spies and most likely just kill them, wipe them out, maybe capture them, find out more about who they are and why they're there. So they begin to just search the whole city. And so these 2 spies from the Israelites find housing in the most unlikeliest, awkward place you can think of. And it was a prostitute's home. Now, let me give you a background of this prostitute. Her name is Rahab. Obviously, when I say prostitute, lots of negativity probably begins to flow through your mind. You see, back in this day, it was no different. That profession, even if you want to call it that, was not respected. It was not like, man, I hope my girl grows up to be a prostitute. It was never, ever something that people hoped they would become or that their family or friend would become. It was looked down upon. It was disrespected. It was not something that people looked at you and said, man, they have credibility. They are someone I want to follow. And so here are the 2 spies, desperate for shelter. They knock on this door that they were trying to find somewhere to stay, and this woman opens the door. Now let me tell you who this woman is, and she lets them in, which is awesome. She responds to them. They ask for shelter. She says yes. She then hides them on her rooftop. And back then, with their different way they built back then was they had a lot of shrubbery and a lot of debris on their roofs. And so she had them hide underneath this debris so they would be camouflaged in, just in case the guards found them. But before we get there, I want to stop and tell you about this woman. Yes, she was a sinner. Yes, she was a prostitute. But she was also this. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a beautiful woman. And something very powerful happens up on that rooftop with the spies and Rahab. But before that could happen, the army of Jericho had caught in wind that the spies were at Rahab's. Too many people had seen them go inside, and they led them there. And so they go knock on the door, and they say, hey, Rahab, where are these dudes? We want them. She's like, they tried to come in, they got in, but then they snuck out again, and I saw them exit the city gate before you were able to lock things down. I saw them go up this road. If you follow them, you have a great shot of catching them. So these soldiers trust Rahab for whatever reason, and they bolt out of there, and they go out of the city gates, and they go try to find these 2 spies, not knowing that they were really upstairs on the roof. And so when Rahab shuts that door, this is what was the cool part of the story for me as I was reading this week, was she didn't just call it a night, because it wasn't her worry. They're up on the roof, they're good, I'll just go to sleep. No, she went upstairs, and she approached them. And then she says 3 things that I believe are so powerful and truly are, because she ended up in Jesus' genealogy. But let's read those 3 things this morning. This story is found in the book of Joshua, chapter 2. Download the YouVersion app, fantastic resource. The Bibles that we've provided for you, which you can take home if you would like. It's on page 154, chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. And this is Rahab's conversation with these 2 spies, the Israelites. This is what she says. She says, I know that the Lord has given you the land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Now, if you take into context who she is, a prostitute, a Gentile, separated from God, a sinner, knowing, she does something in those three sentences to the spies that is so powerful. And the first thing she does is that she admits that she was separated from God. She admitted to the spies, hey, I am not one of you, literally. I'm a Gentile, you're an Israelite. And then she even went as far to say, man, you serve the God, I don't. Just look at who I am. I'm as far away from him as you can be. And then she does something else. She says she believes in what she has heard. You see, the story of the Israelites, generation to this generation, that reputation was spreading all across that country of what God did through Moses and those people and the plagues and how he got them out of Egypt, to what he did for them in the desert, providing them with food constantly and protection, facing armies that they had no reason to face and should have no shot, but they defeated them anyways because God was with them. And this prostitute, Rahab, she heard all these things and she believed it, everything. And the third thing she did was she confessed and surrendered to the spies. She said, hey, listen, I am here to say I will do whatever it takes, and I'm going to surrender. I know that this God that you worship, that you follow, he is the God from above, and he is the God of this world. He is the one true God. That's a huge statement for a Gentile woman to make. So if we go back to the original story of why they're there at Jericho, all the Israelites and being led by Joshua, and now the spies are there to get a report, you recall that God is truly far more patient with us than we truly deserve. He is slow to anger. You see, God's original instructions was this: pray for now, but eventually it was to destroy. All evil had to be dealt with. Men, women, children, livestock, they had to be wiped out. And that was the plan. And the one family that ended up being spared, if you fast forward, the one family that was spared was a prostitute and her extended family. Why is that? By the grace of God and the response to that grace that she had with those spies in that moment led to a very powerful truth that we still live by today, and that is this: that in judgment, there is deliverance. In judgment, there is deliverance. Later on, if you read her, if you read on, she ends up marrying someone, and that's how she gets in the lineage of Jesus. And that's a crazy, awesome story, but we'll get there. But why do you guys think that Matthew chose to include Rahab's name in the ancestry of Christ? I've been thinking about it all week as I've been preparing, and I literally have written why Rahab in the top corner of my sheet that I make out every day and I bring with me wherever I go. And it says, why Rahab? Why? Why her? There had to be one decent person in that town that was way more worthy of it than she was and her family. There had to be. Now, if you continue reading past verse 11, you'll see that the conversation between Rahab and the spies continue. And Rahab goes on to say, after she had stated what she did, we just went over, she says to the spies, I'm going to continue to protect you here, but here's what I need from you. I've just confessed to you and admitted and believed all these things and basically said I want to turn my life around, but I need your help. And she tells the spies, the only way you're getting out of here alive is if we get out of here alive. And also not just me, but my family. That's a huge moment too, I believe, because the second we think prostitute, we think just the complete horrible person who has no heart. But right here, it's proven differently. Even when we have so much evil in us, there's always that speck of hope because God is in us. We were created in his image. And she shows that vulnerability in that moment. And so the spies tell her, okay, deal. But here's what you have to do. You have to hang out a red scarlet cord or bed sheet, whatever, that's going to allow us, to get out of here safely because they climbed out the window and got out the walls that way. And then also leave that hanging out there so that when we do come back, we'll know, our people will know whose house is yours, and you will walk out of here with us. And so she did that. And here's why that scarlet cord, that color of blood, is so important. First off, it's symbolic of her getting almost adopted into God's family in that moment. But also this, if you recall a generation ago, when Israelites were spared during the Passover, back when Moses was trying to get the Israelites out of Egypt, one of the last curses was the firstborn was going to be killed this night. And the only way that you'd survive would be if you took some scarlet red blood and you put it across your door. And that curse will pass through and your whole family, your whole household will be safe. And so if you go back and you read that, there's something to this scarlet red. And if you think fast forward, you think of Jesus' blood, which was the last scarlet red that we truly needed. Now we're all saved. Now we're all adopted into his family. And here's what the scarlet red cord means for us today. And here's what we believe so much in here at Blue Bridge, is that we believe it stands for baptism for us. And why do you ask? Why do you think we think that? It's simply because back then, it was a public declaration of what God was doing and did in their lives. The scarlet blood across the door showed that they trusted God, that they saw him as the one true God. And they believed and had faith that curse was going to pass their house. That scarlet red sheet that hung out of Rahab's window showed that she believed in the Israelites. She believed in their God, and she had chosen to live for that God moving forward. It was a public declaration. And that's what baptism is. There's nothing magical about the water that you get dunked into. It's just a public declaration to your friends and family and to whoever else is in that room at that moment, telling people and showing people, God has done something in me, and I want you to know about it. And from this day forward, I will surrender to him and be a part of his story. And we want to encourage you on January 25th at Together Nights, our next Together Night, we had one about a month ago at outside of the Carmike because of time restraints. It was at Faith Assembly. It was a fantastic night of prayer, worship, and baptism. And afterward, we had cookies. It was a great night, and we're going to do it again because we value that. And that's going to be on January 25th. So that'll be your next opportunity to declare what God has done in your life through baptism. Going back to what she did, admitting that she was a sinner, believing that everything that she heard was true, and confessing and surrendering to be part of God's story moving forward, we know that today is almost like the sinner's prayer. If any of you guys are familiar, if you've grown up in church, you've heard this thing called like the ABCs of salvation. Admit, believe, confess. And that's exactly what, and it's so cool because she did that thousands of years ago, even before it was ever like this thing to do. So do we put ourselves in a position to reach all people like the spies did? You see, the spies, when they knocked on that door and they saw a prostitute, I can't imagine what went through their head. But they were obedient to a point where they were put in a really awkward and dangerous situation. And not only that, they were shown hospitality culturally by someone who was below them and shouldn't have. And that reminds me of a story that we're all familiar with, especially during this time of the year, Joseph and Mary. You think of Joseph and Mary and why they had to go to Bethlehem. And Mary was very pregnant at that time, obviously. She was very, very pregnant. Thankfully, I don't have to experience that. Thank you, women. And here's Joseph heading back to his hometown. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I head back to my hometown, which is here, but whether if I go back to where I went to school or where I spent a season of life, I always have, for the most part, a room to stay in, floor space at the least, or a couch. I've never been told, nope, no room for you here. But I think we miss sometimes in that story, Joseph was going back to his hometown, and he had no place to stay. No one wanted him. And maybe, why was that? Was it because they heard the rumors? They didn't believe. They were afraid. Jesus was born into a very awkward Christmas. So what's the game plan? How are we at Blue Bridge living on mission here? You see, we can't always expect people to come to us. Fear filled Rahab when those men came to her. She let them in. And because of that, because those men had approached her and came to her and stayed there, she was able to go to them and talk with them about life, which opened a door that changed her life forever. I think of my friends specifically who are not following Jesus and not living that lifestyle and not really even interested in it. And I think about, have I really ever approached them, honestly? If I gave you an answer, I'd say no. There's a couple guys that I'm really close to, and I've never talked to them about it. They know who I am. They know what I stand for. But I've never approached them. And I think of, what if the spies didn't respond to her? What if they weren't obedient? Rahab's life may have never changed. We have that opportunity today in our own lives, in our own homes, in our own workplaces. But just as much as it's important that we go to people, it's also important that we create environments where people can invite others to and where people can get involved at. And that's what we're doing today here. And that's what we're going to do next week. So my prayer for you guys is next week, we're counting on next week because of the movie and because of Christmas season. It's going to be one of our biggest Sundays in the history of Blue Bridge. We're not even 2 years old yet. And we believe this is going to be our big Sunday. So what does that mean for us? How are we going to greet lots of guests? How are we going to do it? Are we going to stick to our own little comfortable circles, which I am very guilty of? Or are we going to be intentional to find someone that we don't know or know it's their first time, greet them, even if we don't have one of these on. You don't have to be a greeter to greet. And just say, hey, how's it going? My name's Troy. What's your name? Awesome. Where are you from? Where do you live? Cool. What do you do for a living? You have family? Are they here? Can I help you get them to check in? I mean, just begin to have a conversation with them and then go as far as saying, hey, do you want to sit with me? To be honest, this is kind of an awkward environment to walk into as a first-time guest. We like to sit on the outside, so the only ones available are the middle. And no one wants to sit up here because that'd be really weird because I spit when I talk, but luckily I'm not speaking for a while. But it's going to be a great, great week for us to be Jesus to guests. So right now, if you could pull out your Connect cards. Earlier, I was supposed to have you guys write 2 words on them. It's not too late. And maybe I did. I mixed up the services. But if you can do me a favor, and if you haven't yet, write baptism on there and write +1. And here in a second, the band's going to come back up, and they're going to begin to sing a song, and we're going to worship, and we're going to pray, and we're going to take communion. But I really want you guys, the reason why I'm having you write baptism, and the reason why I'm having you write +1 is because I want you to think about, if you haven't been baptized yet, if you are wondering what it's about, what does it mean, if you have questions, or maybe you're ready to take that jump, circle it. That just lets us know that we can contact you this week and say, hey, how can we answer any questions you have about baptism? We saw you circle it on your Connect card. And then you can share as much or as little as you want. The second one, the +1, see, we believe heavily in the 5 for 5 here at Blue Bridge. That's 5 people praying for them 5 minutes a day. And my hope is those 5 people are not Christ followers. They don't go to another church. Not that we don't need prayer, but we want to be intentional with who we're going after. And my hope is that this week you'll choose one of those people and you will go after them as hard as you ever have this week and tell your spouse or a friend to hold you accountable to that. So right now, if you can just write that name on there so we can partner with you on that. Don't just pray for them, go after them this week. I also want to challenge you, come down as you're getting communion. There'll be people in the prayer corners. Pray with them about that person or those 5 people. Pray with them about being missional. Pray with them that knowing that, we're all forgiven. We all have a little bit of Rahab in us, but we're loved, we're forgiven, we're empowered. And we're going to sing here a sec. I'm going to close in prayer, and then go ahead and stand, get communion, start praying, and let's really go after someone this week. Jesus, I just thank you for another great Sunday. I thank you that we live in a society that allows us to come into a public environment and speak about you. Thank you for that favor. And I also thank you for the story of Rahab. I thank you that her life was changed forever, and she was inside of your genealogy. And I thank you, God, that you forgive us, that our pasts are not our future. You're our future. And I pray that we can spread that hope and that cheer during this season of Christmas. Thank you so much for coming to this earth and living life, showing us how it's done. And I pray, amen.